It's Friday night again. The neon's buzzing, the carpet sticky, and the smell. Well, it's part popcorn, part nostalgia, and mostly questionable life choices. You step into the video store, and there he is behind the counter, a Sideburnzombie, your sarcastic spirit guide through the land of questionable sequels and glorious trash. He's seen things, things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. Wait, no, that was Blade Runner. Anyway, he's seen a lot of bad movies, and that's why you're here. You're here to look at the wall to wall shelves lined with cardboard dreams, clamshell nightmares, and those obscure gems your parents accidentally rented because the good stuff was gone by 7. The clerk doesn't judge you. Well, maybe a little, but he'll never steer you wrong. He hands you a battered VHS tape with a smirk and says, "Here you go. This one's for you, kid. Rewind and be kind." Welcome back to the place where bad is badass and kindness never goes out of style. This is the Badass Movie Friday podcast. Rewind and be kind. All right, Rewind Junkies, gather round the staff pick shelf. This week's cult pick of the week is less about one movie and more about the whole damn aisle of them. I'm talking about the comedy shelves. You know the ones. Faded, cracked cases, a weird smell of plastic, and mystery foot odor. It's the one spot in the video store where your parents were guaranteed to roll your eyes while you whispered, "Hey, we're all gonna get laid," for like the 5,000th time. These were the MVPs of every sleepover, pizza party, or my uncle is babysitting tonight and he's already given up by 6 p.m. These were the tapes that never sat on a shelf for long. You rewound them so many times that the tracking got wonky. I'm talking Ace Ventura, Billy Madison, Tommy Boy, Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, Wayne's World, every Jim Carrey face contortion, and every Chris Farley pratfall committed directly into your memory. This is the Cult Pick of the Week. Let's hit play. So in the 90s, we had a lot of crazy comedies. And I say that the comedy landscape changed in a way in the early 90s and then continued on through the 90s until we got into the late 90s. So in the decade, we started out with movies like Wayne's World and Encino Man, and movies like Home Alone and family friendly movies that we would watch all the time, every day, many, many times. And they were the movies that were basically imprinted into our brains for the rest of our lives. I mean, let's start with Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. This movie was basically weaponized chaos for 11-year-olds. It's a full hour and a half of Jim Carrey just mugging like he just mainlined 4 cans of Surge. I didn't even know what a pet detective was, but I knew I wanted to be one. I mean, you had the hair, you had the Hawaiian shirts, and you had a dude who was talking out of his butt. And if your school had a class clown, they were definitely quoting Ace Ventura. If your school didn't, it's probably because you were the class clown. We didn't even care about what the plot of Ace Ventura was. Yeah, some dolphin gets kidnapped or whatever. Who cares? Jim Carrey's talking through his ass and doing slow mo football tackles in a tutu. This, to us, was pure cinema. And you keep walking down the aisles of the video store and you're looking for other comedy movies that came out around the same time. And one, if Jim Carrey was at the top of your list, probably a close second was Adam Sandler. I mean, movies like Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, absolute gibberish was coming out of this man's mouth, and it was a masterpiece. Sandler built a whole career on yelling like a lunatic and slurring his vowels and punching people in the face. And you know what? We loved it. I mean, Billy Madison taught us anything. They taught us that shampoo is better and nudie magazines were a treasure and that anybody can go back to school as long as they have penguin hallucinations. And then you had Happy Gilmore, where golf met hockey and Bob Barker was throwing hands. It was just the type of movie that fueled a 14, 15-year-old boy. And we absolutely loved it. And then, God bless him, there was Chris Farley. And Tommy Boy was peak Farley. Loud, lovable, sweaty Farley. It's like he didn't act, he just collided with the scene in the screen. And you had David Spade in there with his dry sarcasm and trying not to get crushed by Farley as he fall through a table and still make you cry laughing. The man gave everything to the bit and somehow made Fat Guy in a Little Coat into a national anthem. And the funny thing about Tommy Boy is there's a story behind it that it was supposed to be my first date with a girl, and we had a really bad snowstorm, and she couldn't make it. Now, remember, I want everybody to remember this. It was the 90s. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have pagers. We didn't have, I think we had ravens maybe that we would send to each other. But what we didn't have was a way to get in touch with people. I was staying at my grandma's house, and my grandma lived near the movie theater. She dropped me off, and I waited. And when she didn't show up, the girl I was going to the movies with, she didn't show up. And I went into the movie and I sat down. And I'm watching Tommy Boy and I'm finding it funny. And any time that that door opened and the light blared in because of the theater that we went to back in the day, it had big windows in the front of the building that the sun would pour into. So, and then right in front of it were the doors to go into the theater. I don't think it was a very good architectural, advancement there. Kind of piss poor, because as soon as somebody would open that door, light would pour in to that thing like a glass of Sunny D. It was terrible. It was terrible. But anyway, I digress. It was supposed to be a first date. And she never showed up. And you know what? Par for the course. I know who I am. I know what I'm about. I could see myself getting stood up. But there was always this thing in the back of my mind that there was a bad snowstorm. Maybe she just couldn't make it. Well, fast forward, and I will let everybody know that that girl is now my wife, and we have watched Tommy Boy maybe 1,000 times together. And yeah, that's the story of Tommy Boy. Anyway, let's get back to our comedies aisle section. So let's get back into that. So Encino Man, Wayne's World, I mentioned them earlier. These movies were like early on in the 90s, and they would kind of give us that look into different kind of comedies, breaking the fourth wall, definitely Wayne's World. Uh, Definitely also told us about public access, which fast forward a couple years, and I'll definitely know about that by co-hosting a public access show in the early 2000s. And Wayne's World was kind of a big part of that. And again, Encino Man and Pauly Shore and Sean Astin bringing caveman Brendan Fraser into California Man, as it's called in Europe. So yeah, these were movies that just shaped us and built us and made us who we are today. They were some of the best movies, in my opinion. Were these movies polished and were they sensitive to your needs? No. And you know what? Because they weren't subtle. And they made us laugh like idiots. And you know what? They were our movies. They were movies that we quoted in school, probably got detention for quoting them. And then we would just quote them again because it was worth it. You know how every generation says the previous one is funnier? Well, that's because we have dudes in Hawaiian shirts talking to animals, Farley doing cartwheels through glass tables, and Sandler screaming, "Blah," whatever Sandler does when he screams at things. Just, But also, what we would have is laughing our asses off when an entire family drives off a cliff, as they're screaming O'Doyle rules. These are the kind of movies that raised us. And maybe that's why we are part of a generation who kind of laughs at things that we're not supposed to laugh at. We're part of a generation that finds humor in things where other people might not find that humor. We're a dark generation. We're the Zennial generation, as they call it, those folks born from 1978 to 1984. They grew up with computers, but they also knew how to go outside. They grew up with video games, but the video games didn't control their lives. We learned how to do word processing and play Oregon Trail, but at the same time, we still played suicide or wall ball. I'm not really sure what they called it in your parts, but we called it suicide. And you get pegged with a tennis ball in the back of your head, and it was fine, and everybody loved it. So I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe these comedy movies shaped us into the folks that we are today. It's just going to be funny that one day we will have a president in the White House who will probably have done an Ace Ventura Pet Detective butt talk, or will be doing gibberish at a dinner table. And, you know, just think about that. That's the kind of country that we're going to be in. Anyway, I think now it's time to get back to the show and stop talking nonsense. So here's your mission: go to the comments, go to the answering machine, and tell us your most watched comedy rental. The ones your parents hated, the ones you could quote in your sleep, you wore out until the tape was no longer there. Was it Ace Ventura? Half Baked? Kung Pao? Did you accidentally rent Freddy Got Fingered and your life was never the same? I want to know. I do want to know. Because next, we're going to be talking in the static zone, and we're going to talk about movies that maybe haven't aged like a fine wine, more like a warm jug of expired Yoo-hoo. But that's next. For now, I think what we can do is, by watching these movies from the 90s, is we can rewind, laugh, and repeat the same thing that we've been doing all this time. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. It is time for the late fee confessional. Now, this is part of the show where I have you, the audience, call in and leave me a message. And today we got a call from our friend Kevin, or KCam. You can find him on Instagram. He posts some really cool stuff that he has. He's a retro collector, and he's a really badass dude. So he's got a story about his favorite video store. Let's listen to what Kevin has to say.
So recently I was asked by a good friend of mine to provide some of my personal video store memories or movies that I remember renting back in the day. So of course I said yes, and I'm about to paint the picture for you because those are some of the best memories of my life. All week I'd count the days, couldn't wait for that moment. Friday after school or a lazy summer afternoon, we'd hop in the car and head to the video store here in Ulster County, New York. That place was called Allison Videoland. It was ours. And I don't mean ours like a community pillar or whatever. I mean mine, my family's, my Friday nights. Money was tight, but somehow we always made room for a Friday night rental. It wasn't just a movie or a game. It was the event, the reward, the escape. I remember the days, especially during the summer. We'd drive there with the windows down, vinyl seats sticking to your legs, that sun dipping behind the trees like the world knew you were about to do something important, because it was important. That store was sacred ground. You'd swing open that glass door and bam, the scent hit you. Not fresh popcorn, but that perfectly stale, buttery aroma from the machine behind the counter. I couldn't even see over that counter yet, but I could smell it. Free popcorn handed out in greasy little paper bags whenever you rented a movie. It was salty, a little chewy, and absolutely perfect. Right when you walked in, the counter was to the right, and straight ahead, it was the saloon doors, the forbidden zone, the adult section. Every kid gave it a shot, a quick peek until you caught the glare from someone's mom and suddenly forgot what curiosity was. But I had my lane, the wrestling section, without fail. And listen, this wasn't just, oh cool, I like wrestling. No, this was my religion. Pre-internet, no WWE network, no streaming, just you and a prayer that a WrestleMania or SummerSlam that you hope to watch hadn't been snagged yet. I rented the same ones over and over again, specifically WrestleMania 6. I wore those tapes out like they owed me money. Then it was off to the Sega Genesis wall, praying that Streets of Rage 2 or Road Rash hadn't already been scooped up. And then sometimes, if the stars aligned, I'd get to leave with all three: a wrestling tape, a game, and a movie. That was it. That was the high. My early years were ruled by The Lion King. Watched it 4 times in a single day until my parents finally reclaimed the family TV. Land Before Time, Hook, Home Alone, they were always in rotation. But even back then, I had range. Sometimes my mom would let me dip into the horror section. I'll never forget it. My first scary movie with her was Child's Play. Still creeps the hell out of me. Still brilliant. Which, looking back, was kind of a bold move on her part. But it stuck and still does. When I got older, the rentals changed as well. Beavis and Butthead Do America, Mortal Kombat, Friday, Boys in the Hood, movies like they felt like someone cracked a window and let in a completely different life than yours, and somehow it still made sense. And yep, I rented Jason Goes to Hell more than once. That cover, oof, flames, that chrome mask, and this weird snake thing just exploding through it, looked insane, totally unhinged, not even remotely like other Friday the 13th, but I didn't care. That cover sold it. That's how it worked back then, you know. VHS boxes didn't whisper, they shouted, and you hoped it turned out to be a good movie. Every tape also came with that FBI warning too. Remember that? Like, piracy is a federal offense. And I'm sitting there clutching the secret of ooze like I think I just committed a crime by pressing play too soon. And what really brought it all together? A friend sleeping over. That's when the magic hit full throttle. We'd get some bagel bites that were still frozen in the middle but incinerated along the edges, or we'd have some chips and queso, or cheese in a can and some crackers, and then we'd top it off with IBC root beer in glass bottles because somehow it tasted better that way. Life was good. We didn't know it then, but man, we were rich in all the ways that mattered. Now, the building still stands. The sign is faded, weather-worn, but still there like a ghost waving from a time that refuses to be erased. Eventually, Blockbuster moved in, and it's embarrassing now, but we all went. Bright blue and yellow everything. TVs on the wall, playing trailers or looping who knows what. Shelves jammed, snacks everywhere. The deals were crazy. I believe they had like 5 movies, 5 days for $5. You couldn't beat it. There was another place in Midtown, Kingston too. I can't remember the name, but I remember the ramp. You walked down the street like you were sneaking into some like secret basement vault. It felt like a hidden lair just for VHS junkies. It was chilly, dim, filled with mystery. I'll never forget that. But yeah, that was Alice in Videoland. And that was my childhood.
Thanks for calling in, Kev. I do appreciate it, dude. Memories of old video stores are actually probably some of the best memories that we have. So if you have a video store memory, a favorite video, a favorite movie, a favorite anything that has to do with old school nostalgia, movies, I don't care. We'll talk about music if you want. Whatever you want to talk about. If it's something from the past and it's a memory that brings that nostalgia feeling back to you, send it in. I love to hear it. So stay tuned. We are heading into the static zone next. All right, Rewind Junkies, we're back. Strap in because we're going to definitely shift gears here. We're heading into the static zone, and this is where the picture gets fuzzy and the moral compass gets questionable, and the jokes maybe didn't age all that well, probably tasting like an old bottle of Crystal Pepsi. So here's the deal. Comedy has always been a little dangerous, right? It's supposed to poke the bear and cross the line and say the thing everyone's thinking, but just afraid to say it out loud. Let's be honest. Some of those jokes from the 80s and 90s weren't crossing the line. They were shotgunning a beer and pole vaulting over it. You know, examples of movies that might not be all that PC right now, movies that would get canceled. Let's call it Too Dumb to Cancel, right? It's the comedies we loved but couldn't air today. And these are movies like Revenge of the Nerds, the classic underdog flick, right? Where nerds rise up, fight the jocks, and at the same time casually commit sexual assault via costume deception. Hilarious, right? That's very funny stuff. And the movie got laughs, right? For sure. But it also has a plot that makes you think, wait, did that happen? And yes, it did. In the same vein of those kind of movies, you had Porky's. Porky's was kind of that coming of age. It was, super bad of the 80s, I guess you can say. Peeping Toms, locker room invasions, gym teachers played for laughs while sexually harassing students. Yeah, charming stuff. And then you had movies that still stood in the vein of comedy movies, but it's kind of like, why did you do that? Like a movie like Soul Man. This is one of the movies where a rich white guy literally puts on blackface to get a scholarship. And I'm going to tell you, this was a studio comedy with a theatrical release. It's not a parody. It's not supposed to be a parody movie. It was a straight up movie that came out in 1986. And then you had movies that probably fell into the same, as I said, the same vein of canceled movies of today. But I don't know if this movie, I hear a lot of people online, they talk about like this movie would never be able to be made. And you're probably right. But I think that even back then, it's just Blazing Saddles. I mean, look, Mel Brooks is a legend, and this movie is full of satire. I mean, satire with a capital S. But I don't know if you'd be able to get this into a theater today, and half your audience wouldn't make it past, the campfire fart scene. Is it genius? Yes. Is it loaded with a lot of racial slurs and it's going to offend? Yes. But I think that's what it was made for. I think it was meant to offend in order to diffuse racism. But I don't know if you would want to take a walk in that minefield now. And that's just me talking. I don't really know how other people feel about that. Great to hear your comments in the comment section. Because a lot of these movies were swinging at big targets: racism, classism, toxic masculinity. But they were doing it with sledgehammers and Molotov cocktails. Not all of them were aiming to be these deep thinkers, and some of them were just using the lowest hanging fruit and saying, well, it's funny because it's offensive. And hey, at the time, yeah, that worked. Maybe. There's funny parts of these movies, and I always say that. There's good parts of these movies. But watching now, you might wince, you're going to cringe, and you're going to look around the room and seeing if everybody else heard that line. And that's the static zone. That's where nostalgia meets reality. And that's when the sparks start flying. Why did it matter then? And what do we do with it now? Well, here's a twist. Just because a movie's problematic doesn't mean you have to throw it in the incinerator. Maybe, just maybe, we stop treating it like sacred text and start watching them with a little context. The jokes still might hit, the performances might still kill, but we don't need to pretend everything was perfect just because it came in a VHS box. Hell, half the movies we just praise in the cult picks have at least one moment in it. But comedy evolves. What we were laughing at then is different than what we laugh at now. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe that's just rewinding with open eyes. It's so hard to judge, and it's so hard to say, do we throw this entire movie out, or do we just look at it and say, well, it was of the times, but there are some funny parts in this movie. So here's my challenge to you. Dig out that copy of Blazing Saddles or Animal House and hit play and ask yourself, is this still funny? Or was I just 12 and hopped up on pixie sticks that it was funny to me then? Either way, it is part of our video store DNA. And we're not here to cancel it. We're here to remember it, static and all. All right, we'll be right back. Well, I think that's it. I think we're going to close up the store, put out the Dropbox, and just think about some of the things that we spoke about today. Comedy might not be what it used to be, but maybe we're not what we used to be. And that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. I don't know. It's just the way that we are today. Either way, those tapes made us laugh when we needed the most. Whether it was some guy talking through his butt, a guy screaming about shampoo in a bathtub, or Chris Farley falling through a coffee table. We rewound it, we memorized it, and we lived it. Some of those flicks aged like milk in the sun. Yuck. But comedy isn't about being perfect. It's about timing. And for the moment in time, those movies hit harder than a dodgeball to the face. So here's to the VHS comedies we wore out, the ones we weren't supposed to rent, the ones that made us laugh so hard we choked on our fruit by the foot. Until next time, Rewind Junkies, stay weird, stay funny, and above all else, rewind and be kind.